Tonight, you're going to climb into a bed. Maybe it has a mattress, memory foam, pillow top, coils inside of coils. Maybe it has a frame, a headboard, sheets with a thread count someone convinced you to care about. You'll pull a blanket over yourself, close your eyes, and sleep in one solid block for 7 or 8 hours. And you'll wake up tomorrow and do it all over again. But here's what nobody tells you. Almost every single part of that ritual, the continuous sleep, the raised frame, the mattress, even the idea of sleeping in a dedicated spot is a historically bizarre anomaly. For the overwhelming majority of the human existence, none of it existed. Not the bed, not the mattress, not even the single unbroken night of sleep. And the story of how people actually slept before all of that, it doesn't just change what you think about history. It changes what you think about your own body, your own mind, and what might be quietly missing from your life right now. Let's go back. I mean, way back. Before we talk about beds, we need to talk about the thing that became before beds, which was not the ground, it was trees. Early human ancestors, the hominins, who came before the Homo sapiens, almost certainly slept the way modern great apes still do today, up in branches. Not because they're romantic about it, because the alternative was death. Think about what the African savanna looked like 2 million years ago after dark. Leopards, hyenas, lions, all of them with eyes built for dark, hunting exactly the kind of small, slow, ground-level primate that your ancestors were. Sleeping on the ground wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was a death sentence. So your ancient relatives climbed. They built crude nests in the forks of branches. They wedged themselves in, and they stayed still until morning. But here's what's fascinating. That transition from sleeping in trees to sleeping on the ground wasn't just a change in altitude. Researchers believe that it may have been the most significant evolutionary steps in human history. Because sleeping on the ground meant sleeping together. It meant fire. And fire meant everything changed. And here's a number that should stop you cold. 200,000 years. That's how far back archaeologists have found evidence that humans intentionally constructed their sleeping areas. At a site called Border Cave in South Africa, researchers discovered layers of compressed grass, reeds, and leaves, deliberately assembled into sleeping platforms. Beneath those layers, ash. Ancient humans were burning their old bedding and placing fresh material on the top of that ash. Not randomly, deliberately. Why ash? Scientists believe that it may have been the first pest control. The alkalinity repels insects and parasites. Think about that for a moment. 200,000 years ago, a human being looked at their sleeping spot, thought about bugs, figured out that burning the old materials and sleeping on the remnants solved that problem. And they kept doing it. That's not an animal acting on instinct. That's a person solving a hygiene problem. And then it gets older. At Sibutu Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found bedding dating back approximately 77,000 years. Layers of grass and reeds and something unexpected mixed in. Aromatic plants. Aromatic plants with documented insect-repelling properties. Someone 77,000 years ago was choosing specific plants for their bed, not for comfort, but for function. The misconception most people carry, the ancient humans just dropped when they were tired and slept wherever they were at on bare dirt, is just wrong. It's almost the opposite of truth. Humans invented the concept of a bed tens of thousands of years before they ever invented furniture. The first mattress wasn't springs and foam, it was grass, ash, leaves, and the knowledge of which plants kept the bugs away. But bugs alone didn't explain how humans slept. To understand that, you have to understand fire. Because fire didn't just keep people warm, fire restructured the human night entirely. The earliest solid evidence of a controlled fire comes from the Yonder cave in South Africa, roughly 1 million years ago. Before fire, when the sun went down, everything stopped. You found shelter, you stayed still, and you waited for dawn. Moving at night meant becoming food. Fire changed that equation completely. A campfire creates roughly a 30-foot circle of safety. Predators won't cross into that firelight. Outside that circle, you die. Inside it, for the first time in primate history, you were safe in the dark. But fire gave people something way more profound than safety. It gave them time. Before fire, the useful day ended at sunset. In winter, that might be 8 hours. Fire added 2 to 4 hours to every single day. And over thousands of generations, those extra hours did something to our species that we're only now beginning to understand. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent years recording conversations from among the Juhonzi Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert, one of the last groups of people on Earth still living something close to the original human pattern. What she found was this. During the day, about 80% of the conversations were practical, logistics, hunting plans, economic negotiations, but at night, around the fire, the entire character of the conversation transformed. At night, 81% of the conversations were stories, myths about the origins of the world, tales of people in distant places, jokes that made the whole camp laugh. Wiesner argued that firelight conversations is where human culture was born. The campfire was the original theater, the original classroom, the original place of worship. It was where humans first learned to think about the immediate moment and imagine things that didn't yet exist. We didn't evolve around fires for survival alone. We evolved around fires to become human. Now here's the part that nobody talks about, and I want this to really sit in with you, because this might explain something about your own life that you've never been able to explain. You were not designed to sleep the way you sleep right now. In 2001, historian Roger Eckert published a paper that quietly upended sleep science. He had spent 16 years digging through historical records, prayer books from the 1400s, court documents, medical texts, private diaries, letters, even passages in Homer's Odyssey. And he kept finding references to the same thing: first sleep and second sleep. Before the industrial era, people across the centuries and cultures did not sleep in one continuous block. They went to bed shortly after sunset, slept for about 4 hours, woke up, stayed awake for 1 to 2 hours in the middle of the night, then went back to sleep for another 4 hours until dawn. This wasn't insomnia. This wasn't a disorder. This was how every human on the planet slept for thousands of years. And what did the people do during that middle of the night waking period? Well, everything. A French physician in the 16th century recommended it as the ideal time for couples to conceive children. People visited neighbors. They interpreted their dreams while the images were still fresh. They prayed, they wrote. A doctor's manual from the 1500s specifically advised patients that the best time to study and reflect was during the watch. Those quiet hours between the first and second sleep, when the mind was calm and the world was still. Historians had been reading these references for centuries, but they kept translating them into modern terms because they couldn't imagine that people ever slept differently than how we do today. The assumption was so deeply embedded that scholars were literally mistranslating ancient Greek and medieval Latin to make ancient sleep patterns fit our own modern experience. Then, science confirmed what history had been saying all along. In 1992, psychiatrist Thomas Ware at the National Institute of Mental Health ran a simple experiment. He took volunteers and removed all the artificial light from their lives. 14 hours of darkness every night, the same darkness our ancestors would have experienced before the age of electric light. Within weeks, every single participant settled into the same pattern without being told to. 4 hours of sleep, 1 to 3 hours of quiet wakefulness, 4 more hours of sleep. Their bodies just did it, as if some ancient program was sitting dormant inside of them, just waiting. But here's the part that was genuinely extraordinary. Ware measured their hormone levels during that wakeful period. Their brains were producing elevated levels of prolactin, the same hormone released during meditation and after sex. They described the state as peaceful, reflective, almost meditative. It was not a gap in sleep. It was its own distinct state of consciousness. One that most modern humans have never experienced. One that doesn't happen anymore because we abolished those conditions that created it. Now, to understand what we lost, you have to understand what the night actually meant to people before electricity. The word curfew comes from a French curfew. It literally means cover fire. In medieval towns, the bell would ring each evening, signaling everyone to extinguish or cover their fires. Not primarily for safety from burning buildings, but because night was supposed to be dark. Night was when you were vulnerable. Night was when predators moved. Night belonged to criminals and the supernatural. In many medieval European cities, walking outside after dark without a lantern was literally illegal. People feared the dark in a way that is almost impossible for modern people to grasp. And then we conquered it. Paris installed street lamps in the 1600s under King Louis, who wanted to reduce crime. London followed. Cheaper candles arrived. Gas lamps in the 1800s. Then, in 1879, Thomas Edison commercialized the electric light bulb. And then, within a single generation, the night, as humans had known it for 300,000 years, was gone. Your body doesn't know the difference between a light bulb and the sun. When light hits your retina at 11 p.m., your brain interprets it as daytime. It delays the melatonin. It fragments your sleep. It disrupts the circadian rhythm that evolved over millions of years. Modern humans are exposed to artificial light at an average of 7 to 8 hours after sunset. Researchers have found that people who spend just 1 week camping with no artificial light at all have their melatonin cycles reset by nearly 2 hours. Their bodies start producing melatonin at sunset instead of hours after it. And that's all it truly takes for hundreds of thousands of years of biology to reset itself. There's one more piece to this story, and it comes from the Hasda people of Tanzania, one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer societies on Earth. Researchers studying Hasda sleep patterns found something remarkable. Average sleep duration was about 6.25 hours. Sleep was flexible, tied closely to natural light, but the truly striking finding was what happened across the group at night. Different people naturally fell asleep and woke up at different times. Older individuals tended to wake up earlier, while younger people stayed up later. And when the researchers tallied all of this up, at least one person in the group was awake or lightly sleeping during 99.8% of the night. No assigned guards, no formal watch schedule, just the natural variation in sleep patterns across a group of humans who evolved together, creating something close to continuous vigilance automatically. Your sleeplessness at 3 a.m. might not be a malfunction. It might be your ancient biology doing exactly what it was built to do, keeping watch, staying ready, making sure that in the darkness, your group was never entirely without someone who was awake. So here's where we land. Humans were building beds 200,000 years ago, not because they were comfortable, but because they were smart. They chose the right plants, burned the right ash, and picked the right spots next to the fire. For most of human history, sleep wasn't a solo act performed in an isolated room. It was a communal practice structured around firelight, broken into 2 phases with a window of reflection in the middle that produced a state of consciousness we don't even have a word for anymore. We didn't stumble into modern sleep, we invented it. We recently, very suddenly, through gas lamps and light bulbs and industrial pressure to be productive from the moment you open your eyes until the moment you force them shut. The oldest mattress ever found is made of grass and ash and insect-repelling leaves, assembled by human hands 200,000 years ago on a floor of a cave in South Africa. It doesn't look like much, but someone slept on it. Someone woke up in the middle of the night and laid in the dark and thought about their life. Someone made sure the fire was still burning, and in the morning, they got up and built a world that we inherited. We traded all of that for a light switch. Most of us never even knew it was gone.